It was 3:15 a.m. on a Tuesday. The alleyway behind the Obsidian, one of Manhattan's most exclusive underground clubs, smelled of stale champagne, expensive cigarettes, and wet asphalt. Isla pulled the collar of her threadbare coat tighter around her neck. She was 23, but her hands looked older, red-chapped and trembling from the cold. She dragged a heavy black trash bag across the concrete, her breath puffing in white clouds. "Hurry it up, Isla," the shift manager, a man named Gary, who smelled perpetually of onions and old spice, yelled from the back door. "If you miss the garbage truck, I'm docking your pay." "I'm going, Gary, I'm going," Isla whispered to herself. She heaved the bag up. It landed in the dumpster with a wet thud. She turned to leave, desperate to get home to her tiny studio apartment in the Bronx, where the radiator hissed but never actually produced heat. Then she heard it. It was faint, a mewling sound, like a kitten stuck in a drain pipe. Isla froze. The city was loud sirens wailing on 5th Avenue, the rumble of the subway beneath the grate. But this sound was distinct. It was close. She turned back to the dumpster. The heavy metal lid was half open. She reached in, pushing aside a bag filled with empty Dom Perignon bottles. The sound came again. A choked, gurgling sob. Isla's heart hammered against her ribs. She moved a soaked cardboard box labeled Cisco Foods. There, nestled between bags of rotting garnish and broken glass, was a bundle. It wasn't a kitten. It was a baby. Isla gasped, the sound tearing from her throat. The infant was wrapped in a blanket that looked out of place in the filth-thick, cream-colored cashmere with a strange embroidered crest in gold thread, a lion holding a rose. The baby's face was blue from the cold, her tiny fists clenched tight. "Oh my God," Isla breathed. She didn't think. She didn't check for cameras. She didn't call for Gary. Her instinct, honed by years of surviving on her own, took over. She scooped the bundle up. The baby was ice cold. Isla unzipped her coat and pressed the tiny body against the warmth of her uniform, a cheap polyester maid's dress. "I've got you," she whispered, tears stinging her eyes. "I've got you, little one." The baby let out a sharp, piercing cry, finally finding her breath. Isla looked around frantically. Who would throw a baby away? And not just any baby. This child smelled like lavender and expensive powder. She looked at the back door of the club. If she went back inside, Gary would call the cops. The cops would call child services. Isla had grown up in the system. She knew what happened to babies in the system. They got lost. Not tonight, she thought. She ran. She ran out of the alley onto the slick pavement of Tribeca, clutching the shivering bundle to her chest. She didn't stop until she reached the subway station, swiping her Metro card with shaking hands. Under the harsh fluorescent lights of the 2 train, Isla finally looked closely at the child. The baby had a shock of black hair and startlingly grey eyes. Eyes that looked too old, too serious for an infant. Tucked into the folds of the cashmere blanket was a piece of heavy cardstock paper. Isla pulled it out with 2 fingers. It wasn't a note. It was a photograph, a Polaroid of a man. He was standing on a balcony, wearing a bespoke suit that probably cost more than Isla would earn in a lifetime. He was devastatingly handsome, with sharp cheekbones and eyes that matched the baby's steel grey. But his expression was terrifying. It was a look of pure, unadulterated power. On the back of the photo, scrawled in red lipstick, were 3 words. Let him suffer. Isla felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wet clothes. She wasn't just holding a baby. She was holding a weapon in someone's war. For 2 days, Isla didn't sleep. Her apartment in the Bronx was small, but she kept it clean. She used the last of her tips to buy formula diapers and a cheap thermometer from the Walgreens on Jerome Avenue. She named the baby Hope because she didn't know what else to call her. The baby Hope was fussy. She wouldn't eat. She cried with a heartbreaking intensity that made the neighbors bang on the walls. "Shut that kid up!" Mrs. Russo yelled from 4B. Isla paced the floorboards, rocking the child. "Shh, please, you have to eat." She had the news playing on her cracked TV screen in the background. She was waiting. Waiting for an Amber Alert. Waiting for a frantic mother, pleading for her child's return. But there was nothing. No missing children reports matched the girl. Until Wednesday night. Isla was folding laundry when the breaking news banner flashed across the screen of NY1. War in the Underworld. Daughter of Dante Moretti presumed dead in kidnapping gone wrong. Isla dropped the shirt she was holding. The screen showed a photo. It was the man from the Polaroid, Dante Moretti. The reporter, standing in front of a massive wrought-iron gate in the Upper East Side, looked nervous. Sources say the 3-month-old heiress, Sophia Moretti, was taken from her nursery 2 days ago. No ransom demand was made. Police fear this was a targeted hit by the rival Salvano crime family. Dante Moretti has offered a $5 million reward for information, but authorities believe. Isla stopped listening. She looked down at the baby sleeping fitfully on her mattress. Sophia. Her name was Sophia, and her father was Dante Moretti, the capo dei capi, the man the tabloids called the King of New York. Isla's stomach dropped. If she went to the police, they would think she took her, a poor maid with a stolen baby. She'd be arrested before she could explain. Or worse, if the people who kidnapped Sophia knew she was alive, they would come for her. She looked at the Polaroid again. Let him suffer. Whoever took Sophia wanted Dante to think she was dead. They wanted him to grieve. Isla looked at Sophia's pale face. The baby was getting warmer. A fever. She needed a doctor, a real doctor, not the clinic down the street. Isla made a choice. It was a stupid, reckless, suicidal choice. She dressed Sophia in the warmest clothes she could find, a yellow onesie that was slightly too big. She wrapped her back in the cashmere blanket with the lion crest. She took the subway to the Upper East Side. The Moretti estate wasn't a house. It was a fortress. It took up an entire block on 72nd Street. High stone walls, cameras swiveling like predatory birds, and men in dark suits standing by the gate. Isla stood across the street, shivering. It was raining again. She crossed the street. Her legs felt like lead. A guard, a massive man with a scar running through his eyebrow, stepped forward. He put a hand on the holster at his waist. "Lost, sweetheart," he rumbled. "Keep walking." Isla hugged the bundle tighter. I need to see Mr. Moretti." The guard laughed. It was a cruel, barking sound. "Yeah, and I need a vacation in the Maldives. Get lost." "Please," Isla said, her voice shaking but loud. "I have something of his. Leave a package at the side entrance." "Move!" He stepped closer, his presence looming over her. "It's not a package," Isla yelled, desperation taking over. She pulled the blanket down, just an inch, revealing the baby's face. "I have his daughter." The silence that followed was heavier than the thunder. The guard's face went pale. He tapped his earpiece. "Code red. Gate 1. Don't shoot. I repeat, hold fire." The massive iron gates groaned open. "Don't move!" The guard hissed his hand, hovering over his gun. "If you make one sudden move, you're dead before you hit the ground." Isla didn't move. She stood in the rain, clutching the most dangerous object in New York City, as a fleet of black SUVs roared down the driveway. They didn't take her to a police station. They took her to the library. It was a room bigger than Isla's entire apartment building, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a fireplace large enough to roast a pig, and the smell of old leather and expensive scotch. Isla stood in the center of the Persian rug. She was dripping wet. Her cheap sneakers squeaked. Sophia had been taken from her arms the moment she stepped inside. A team of private doctors and nurses had swarmed the baby, whisking her away to a medical wing Isla couldn't see. Now she was alone. The door opened. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Dante Moretti walked in. He looked exactly like the photo, but terrifyingly real. He was tall, over 6'3", wearing a black dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing tattoos that curled around his forearms like vines. His face was a mask of exhausted fury. He hadn't slept. His eyes were rimmed with red, and stubble darkened his jaw. He didn't look at Isla. He walked to the side table, poured a glass of amber liquid, and drank it in one swallow. Only then did he turn. His eyes, that piercing steel grey, locked onto her. Isla felt like a deer in the headlights of a semi-truck. "Who are you?" His voice was low, a baritone rumble that vibrated in her chest. "Isla," she squeaked. She cleared her throat. "Isla Vance. I mean just Isla." She caught herself. She remembered she hated her father's last name. "Isla Evans." "Isla Evans," Dante repeated, tasting the name. He walked toward her slow, predatory steps. "And tell me, Isla Evans, how did a maid with $42 in her bank account and an eviction notice on her door end up with my daughter?" Isla gasped. He already knew everything about her. "I found her," Isla said, her chin trembling. "In the trash." Dante stopped. His face twitched. A muscle in his jaw jumped. "The trash." "Behind the obsidian," Isla said quickly, the words tumbling out. "I work there. I was taking out the bottles. She was in a dumpster, Mr. Moretti, wrapped in that blanket. I didn't steal her. I swear." Dante closed the distance between them in a split second. He grabbed her arm, not painfully, but with a grip that told her she couldn't escape. He pulled her close. She could smell him expensive cologne tobacco and rain. "If you are lying to me," he whispered, his face inches from hers. "If you had anything to do with taking her, I will dismantle your life piece by piece. I will make you beg for the end." Isla looked up at him. She was terrified, yes, but she was also angry. She had saved his child. She had fed her, warmed her, and walked into a fortress to return her. "I didn't take her," Isla said, finding a backbone she didn't know she had. "I saved her. She was freezing. She was hungry. I bought her formula with my tip money, so you can threaten me all you want, but your daughter is alive because of me." Dante stared at her. For a long, agonizing minute, he searched her eyes for deception. He looked at her wet clothes, her worn-out shoes, the defiance in her posture. Slowly, his grip on her arm loosened. His hand slid down to her wrist, his thumb brushing her pulse. It was racing. "Sir," a voice came from the door. It was the bodyguard, Rocco. "The doctors say the baby is dehydrated and has a mild fever, but she's okay. She's fine, boss." Dante let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for days. His shoulders sagged just a fraction. The monster receded, and for a second, Isla saw just a father. "She's fine," Dante whispered. "And," Rocco continued, looking uncomfortable, "we checked the security footage from the club alleyway. The girl is telling the truth. A sedan pulled up at 2:00 a.m. Someone dumped the package. Isla came out at 3:15. Dante turned back to Isla. The intensity was back, but it was different now. It was calculating. "You saved her," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Isla whispered. "And you saw who dropped her." "No," Isla said. "But I found this." She reached into her wet pocket and pulled out the soggy Polaroid. Dante took it. He looked at the photo of himself. He flipped it over. Let him suffer. Dante's face went rigid. His eyes turned to black ice. He recognized the handwriting. "Serena," he hissed. Isla took a step back. "Can I go now, please? I just want to go home." Dante looked at her. He looked at the woman who had pulled his legacy out of the garbage. He looked at the enemies he knew were watching his house right now. If they knew Isla had found the baby, if they knew she was the witness. "No," Dante said coldly. Isla panicked. "What?" "But I brought her back. You are the only person who can identify the car. Maybe even the driver if we dig deep enough into your memory," Dante said. "And you are the one person Serena will want dead for ruining her plan." He walked to the door and locked it. "You aren't going anywhere, Isla," Dante said, turning back to her. "You're staying here." I can't stay here," Isla cried. "I have a job. I have a life." "You have a death sentence if you walk out that gate," Dante corrected. "From this moment on, you belong to the Moretti family." He picked up a phone from the desk. "Rocco, prepare the East Wing, and get a dressmaker here in the morning. She looks like she's wearing a rag." "I am not your prisoner," Isla shouted. Dante stopped. He looked at her, a strange spark of interest in his eyes. No one shouted at Dante Moretti. "No," he said softly. "You're not a prisoner. You're the nanny." The first week at the Moretti estate was a blur of silk sheets and cold stares. Isla was given a suite in the East Wing, adjacent to the nursery. It was larger than the entire floor of the tenement building she grew up in. The bed was like a cloud. The bathroom had a tub deep enough to swim in, and the closet was filled with clothes that had been delivered the morning after her arrival. Not maid uniforms, cashmere sweaters, soft denim silk blouses. But Isla didn't feel like a guest. She felt like a bird in a gilded cage. There were guards everywhere. 2 at the end of the hall, 1 at the bottom of the stairs. And Rocco the giant with the scar seemed to be her personal shadow. "Can I just go to the kitchen to get water?" Isla asked on the 4th day, frustration bubbling over. Rocco didn't look up from his phone. "Kitchen staff brings water. You stay with the baby." Isla huffed and slammed the door. Her only solace was Sophia. The baby was recovering well. Her fever had broken, and those grey eyes, Dante's eyes, were bright and alert. Isla spent her days rocking her singing, quiet lullabies she remembered from the radio and feeding her. She rarely saw Dante. He was a ghost in his own house. She heard his car leave before dawn and return long after midnight. But she felt him. One night a week after her arrival, a thunderstorm battered the city. Sophia woke up screaming. Isla was up in an instant. She scooped the baby out of the crib, pacing the nursery floor. "Shh, it's just noise, pretty girl. It's just the sky being loud," Isla cooed, rubbing Sophia's back. "I've got you. Nobody hurts you while I'm here." Lightning flashed, illuminating the room. in a stark white strobe. When the darkness returned, Isla gasped. Dante was standing in the doorway. He was wearing sweatpants and nothing else. His chest was a road map of scars, knife wounds, bullet grazes, and tattoos that told stories of violence. He looked exhausted, a glass of whiskey loosely held in one hand. "She's loud," he said, his voice rough with sleep and whiskey. "She's scared," Isla whispered, hugging Sophia tighter. She tried not to stare at his chest, but it was impossible. The man was built like a statue of a vengeful god. Dante walked into the room. He didn't turn on the light. He moved to the window, watching the rain lash against the glass. "My wife. My ex-wife. She never held her," Dante said suddenly. The confession hung in the air, heavy and unexpected. Serena hated the crying. She said it gave her migraines. Nannies did everything. Isla didn't know what to say. Babies need touch. They need to know they aren't alone. Dante turned. He looked at Isla, really looked at her. Her hair was messy. She was wearing an oversized t-shirt, and she looked tired. But she was holding his daughter like she was the most precious thing in the world. "Why did you do it?" Dante asked. He took a step closer. The smell of whiskey and rain was intoxicating. "Why did you bring her back? You could have left her at a police station. You could have walked away." "I told you," Isla said softly. "I grew up in the system. I know what happens to lost girls. I couldn't let her be lost." Dante reached out. For a second, Isla thought he was going to touch her face. Her breath hitched. Instead, his large, rough hand covered Sophia's tiny back, his fingers brushing against Isla's arm. The heat from his skin burned her. "You aren't a maid anymore, Isla," he murmured, his voice dropping an octave. "You are the only person in this house I know didn't sell me out. Do you understand that everyone has a price? But you walked into the fire for nothing." "I didn't do it for you," Isla said, her voice shaking. "I did it for her." Dante's eyes darkened. "Good. Keep it that way, because being loyal to me gets people killed." He pulled his hand away, as if he'd been turned on his heel, and walked out into the dark hallway. Isla stood there, her heart hammering a rhythm against her ribs that had nothing to do with the storm. 3 weeks later, the atmosphere in the house shifted. It went from quiet tension to frantic preparation. The Moretti Charity Gala. Mrs. Higgins, the head housekeeper, announced, dropping a garment bag on Isla's bed. "Mr. Moretti expects you to attend." "Me?" Isla blinked. "I'm the nanny. I don't go to galas." "You do tonight," Mrs. Higgins said, her lips a thin line. "He wants Sophia there for a brief appearance, to show the city she is alive and well, to show strength. You will carry her." Isla unzipped the bag. It wasn't a uniform. It was a gown. Midnight blue silk floor length, with a slit up the leg that made Isla blush just looking at it. He picked it out himself. Mrs. Higgins sniffed, clearly disapproving. That evening, when Isla walked down the grand staircase, the air left the room. The foyer was filled with security lawyers and advisors. But when Isla descended, holding Sophia dressed in a white lace dress, silence fell. Dante was waiting at the bottom of the stairs. He wore a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin. When he looked up and saw Isla, his conversation with his capo cut off mid-sentence. His eyes swept over her, devouring the way the blue silk clung to her curves, the way her hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders. "Is this appropriate?" Isla whispered when she reached him, feeling self-conscious under his intense gaze. "It's perfect," Dante said. He didn't smile, but his eyes smoldered. "Stay close to me. Rocco is on your left. Do not accept food or drink from anyone unless I hand it to you. Understand?" "Yes." Isla swallowed. The gala was held at the Plaza Hotel. It was a sea of diamonds, champagne, and fake smiles. Isla felt like an imposter, but she held her head high, clutching Sophia. Dante paraded them through the room. It was a power move. "Look at my heir. Look at my family. We are untouchable." Midway through the night, a woman approached. She was stunning. Platinum blonde hair, lips painted blood red, wearing a dress that cost more than Isla's childhood home. She moved like a viper. "Dante," she purred. Dante stiffened. His hand went to the small of Isla's back, pulling her behind him. "Serena." He greeted his voice like grinding stones. Isla's blood ran cold. This was the mother. The woman who wrote "Let Him Suffer." "I heard the little brat survived," Serena said, glancing at Sophia with a look of pure disgust. "Pity. I had such high hopes for a closed casket funeral." "Careful, Serena," Dante warned, his voice low and dangerous. "You're in public, but we both know what you did, and we both know reckoning is coming." Serena laughed, a tinkling, soulless sound. "You have no proof, darling. Just the word of a... What is she, a trash picker?" She sneered at Isla. Isla stepped forward. "I'm the woman raising the daughter you threw away like garbage." Serena's eyes narrowed. "Enjoy her while you can, sweetie. Accidents happen every day." She signaled a waiter. "Champagne for Mr. Moretti, to calm his nerves." The waiter, a young man with shaking hands, presented a tray. There were 2 glasses. Dante reached for one. He was staring at Serena, his rage blinding him to the details. "No!" Isla shouted. She lunged forward, knocking the glass from Dante's hand. It shattered on the marble floor. The liquid hissed as it touched the stone, bubbling slightly. The room went silent. Isla grabbed Dante's arm. "The waiter," she gasped. "Look at his shoes." Dante looked. The waiter was wearing expensive Italian loafers, scuffed but clearly not the standard issue hotel shoes. And on his wrist, peeking out from the uniform, was a tattoo of a scorpion, the symbol of the Salvano family. "Gun!" Rocco screamed. The waiter reached into his jacket. Dante moved faster than humanly possible. He shoved Isla and Sophia behind a marble pillar just as 2 shots rang out. Bang, bang. The chandelier above them exploded in a shower of crystal. "Get them out!" Dante roared, drawing a silver pistol from beneath his tuxedo jacket. He returned fire, dropping the fake waiter with a single shot to the chest. Pandemonium erupted. Screaming guests stampeded for the exits. Rocco grabbed Isla. "Go now." As they ran toward the kitchen exit, Isla looked back. Dante was standing in the center of the chaos, firing calmly, a shield between his family and the wolves. They returned to the estate in a convoy of armored SUVs. The mood was funereal. Dante stormed into the library, ripping off his bow tie. How did a Salvano hitman get into a closed event? How did he get close enough to serve me a drink? His advisors, 3 older men in suits, looked at the floor. "We vetted the staff, boss," one said. "Someone must have swapped the roster last minute." "Someone inside gave them the access codes," Dante said. He poured a drink, his hand shaking slightly with adrenaline. He turned to Isla, who was sitting on the sofa still clutching a sleeping Sophia. "You saved my life," Dante said. "Again." "His shoes were wrong," Isla whispered. "At the club. I used to watch the bouncers. They always looked for the shoes. Fake staff never wear the cheap shoes." Dante looked at her with a mixture of awe and suspicion. "You have good instincts." Just then, the head of IT, a nervous man named Felix, ran into the room. "Boss, we found the breach, the security codes for the gala. They were emailed to the Salvanos yesterday." "From who?" Dante demanded. Felix swallowed hard. He looked at Isla. "From an IP address registered to the guest Wi-Fi in the East Wing," Felix whispered. "From Isla's iPad." Isla stood up, nearly dropping the baby. "What? No, I don't even know how to use the iPad." Dante went still. The warmth in his eyes evaporated, replaced by the cold, dead look she had seen that first night. "Isla," he said softly, "did you tell them where we would be?" "No." Isla cried, tears springing to her eyes. "Dante, please. You know me. I saved you." "Or maybe that was the plan," Dante said, his voice rising. "Gain my trust. Get close. Then open the door for the kill shot." "Boss," Rocco interjected. "She took a bullet for the kid." "Quiet," Dante roared. He turned on Isla. "I let you in. I let you hold my daughter. And you sell me out." "I didn't," Isla screamed. "Check the bank accounts. Check my phone." "I have nothing." Dante grabbed her arm, pulling her close. "If I find out you were working with Serena—" "Boss!" Felix shouted again, typing furiously on his laptop. "Wait. Wait." Dante froze. "What?" "I'm tracing the packet route," Felix said, sweat dripping down his forehead. "The email was sent from the East Wing. Yes, but it wasn't sent from the iPad. It was a remote tunnel." "English, Felix," Dante barked. "Someone hacked her device," Felix said. "They used her iPad as a proxy to frame her. The origin signal is coming from inside the house, from the West Wing." The West Wing. The staff quarters. Dante released Isla. He looked at Mrs. Higgins, who was standing by the door with a tray of tea. Mrs. Higgins went pale. She dropped the tray. "Martha," Dante said, his voice broken. "You—" Mrs. Higgins' face twisted into a sneer. "Serena pays better, Dante. And she promised my son a seat on the board." She reached into her apron, pulling out a small revolver. But she was an old woman, and Rocco was a professional. Before she could raise the gun, Rocco had tackled her to the ground. Dante stood over the woman who had made his bed for 10 years. "Get her out of my sight! The basement!" Rocco dragged the screaming woman away. Dante turned back to Isla. She was trembling, holding her bruised arm where he had grabbed her. The guilt on his face was devastating. He dropped to his knees in front of her. The King of New York kneeling before a maid. "Isla," he rasped. I almost— You didn't trust me," Isla whispered, a tear rolling down her cheek. "After everything." "I don't know how to trust," Dante confessed. He reached out his hand, hovering over hers. "Teach me. Please. Don't leave." Isla looked at the man who carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. She saw the fear behind the rage. "I'm not leaving," she said softly. "But you have to stop fighting alone." Dante leaned his forehead against her knees. For the first time in years, the Lion of New York closed his eyes and rested. The peace that had settled over the Moretti estate was a lie. It was the heavy, suffocating silence that comes before a hurricane. It broke at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. Isla was awake, nursing Sophia in the rocking chair by the window. The rain was lashing against the bulletproof glass, masking the sound of the engine until it was too late. The first sign wasn't a noise, it was a vibration. The water in the glass on the nightstand rippled. Then the floorboards beneath Isla's feet trembled. Boom! The sound was so loud, it didn't register as a noise, it felt like a physical blow to the chest. The entire east side of the mansion shuddered. Car alarms up and down the block began to wail in a discordant chorus. Isla clutched Sophia tight, her heart leaping into her throat. The intercom on the wall crackled to life, but it wasn't the calm, professional voice of the night security. It was a scream cut short by the wet tearing of automatic gunfire. "Breach Southgate! They have a ram! They have a static!" The door to the nursery flew open. Isla gasped, shielding Sophia's body with her own, expecting a gunman. It was Dante. He was already in motion, a force of nature fueled by adrenaline. He wore tactical pants and a black Kevlar vest over a white t-shirt. He held an assault rifle in one hand and a handgun in the other. His face was no longer the face of the man who had kissed her goodnight hours ago. It was the face of the capo, the devil of New York. "Isla, move," he commanded, his voice devoid of fear, replaced by icy precision. "What's happening?" Isla cried, scrambling up the baby wailing in her arms. "Serena," Dante spat the name like a curse. "She's not playing games anymore. She brought an army." He grabbed Isla's arm, not gently. There was no time for gentle. He practically dragged her into the hallway. The air already smelled of sulfur and burning rubber. "Rocco!" Dante roared. The massive head of security appeared at the top of the stairs, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead. "They drove a modified sanitation truck through the main gate, boss. It's armored. They're pouring into the courtyard. At least 30 men. Heavy ballistics." "Hold the staircase," Dante ordered. "Buy me 2 minutes." "I'll buy you 5, Rocco grunted, racking the slide of his shotgun. Dante pulled Isla toward the master bedroom. He shoved aside a heavy mahogany wardrobe with a grunt of exertion, revealing a steel panel in the wall. He punched in a code, fast 4 digits, and the panel hissed open, revealing a dark, narrow staircase. "The panic room," Dante said, his eyes locking onto hers. They were wild, desperate. "It's in the foundation. Independent air supply, reinforced steel. Nothing gets in." He ushered her into the darkness. Isla stopped on the first step, turning back to him. "You're coming, right?" Her voice cracked. "Dante, get in." "I can't," he said, his voice dropping to a rough whisper. "If I hide, they burn the house down on top of us. I have to cut the head off the snake." He reached out his hand, cupping her cheek. His thumb brushed away a tear. "Keep her quiet. Keep her safe. Do not open that door unless you hear my voice. Not for the police. Not for God himself. Only me." "Don't die," Isla sobbed. "For you." Dante's lips curled into a terrifying, beautiful smile. "I'll kill them all." He slammed the steel door shut. The lock engaged with a heavy, final thud. Isla was alone in the dark. She stumbled down the stairs, the emergency lights flickering on a sickly red glow. The panic room was cold. It was a sterile box of concrete and steel, lined with monitors, shelves of canned food, and a cot. Isla sat on the cot, rocking a screaming Sophia. "Shh, baby, shh. Daddy's fighting the monsters. Daddy's going to win." She looked at the monitors. The feed was grainy, but the horror was high definition. On camera 1, she saw the foyer. It was a war zone. Men in black tactical gear and gas masks were swarming over the marble floors. The expensive vases, the art, the history of the Moretti family. It was all being shattered by a hail of bullets. She saw Rocco at the top of the stairs, a monolith of violence, firing his shotgun, holding the high ground. Then she saw Dante. He moved like a shadow. On camera 2 in the east hallway, he flanked 3 attackers. He didn't just shoot, he dismantled them. 2 shots to the chest, 1 to the head. Efficient. Brutal. He was a lion protecting his pride, and he was tearing the intruders apart. But there were too many of them. Isla watched, mesmerized by the horror, until a movement on camera 4 caught her eye. Camera 4 showed the rear exterior of the house near the garden ventilation units. 3 men were huddled around the heavy steel box that housed the air intake for the basement. They weren't trying to break in. They were setting something up. Canisters. Yellow canisters with skull symbols. Isla's blood ran cold. They weren't trying to breach the panic room. They knew they couldn't drill through the steel in time. They were going to gas them out. "No," Isla whispered. She looked at the digital air quality monitor on the wall of the panic room. It read, AIR supply, external, filtration active. On the screen, one of the men turned a valve. A second later, a hissing sound filled the panic room. It wasn't the sound of fresh air. It was a low serpentine hiss coming from the vent above the cot. The air quality monitor beeped. Warning. Contaminant detected. Isla scrambled back, clutching Sophia. She grabbed a towel from the emergency shelf and pressed it over the baby's face. "Think, Isla, think." She panicked. If she stayed, the filtration system would fail eventually, or they would pump in something that filters couldn't catch. Carbon monoxide, sarin, smoke. If she opened the door, she was back in the house in the middle of a gunfight, unarmed. She looked at Sophia. The baby's eyes were wide, reflecting the red emergency lights. Isla made a choice. It was the choice of a mother, not a victim. She would rather die on her feet, fighting, than choke to death in a steel box. She laid Sophia in the corner of the room, behind a heavy crate of water bottles. She covered the baby with blankets, creating a small cocoon. "Stay quiet, my love," she whispered, kissing the baby's forehead. Isla went to the wall where Dante kept the last resort supplies. There was a shotgun, but she didn't know how to use it. The recoil would probably dislocate her shoulder. She needed something simple, something chaotic. She grabbed a heavy industrial fire extinguisher. She grabbed a flare gun, orange plastic loaded. She grabbed a serrated hunting knife and shoved it into the waistband of her pajama pants. She stood by the steel door. Her hand hovered over the keypad. Her fingers were trembling so violently she could barely type. 1, 2, 3, 4. The lock disengaged. The door hissed open. The noise of the battle hit her instantly. It wasn't muffled anymore. The gunfire was deafening, echoing off the stone walls of the basement corridor. Isla stepped out. The basement hallway was dimly lit. To her left was the staircase leading up to the main house. To her right, the service entrance that led to the garden where the men with the gas canisters were. "Check the pressure," a voice shouted from the service entrance. "The boss wants them smoked like rats!" Isla turned right. She moved in her socks, silent as a ghost. She rounded the corner. The service door had been blown off its hinges. 3 men stood there, framed by the rainy night, their backs to her, as they messed with the intake valves. Isla raised the flare gun. She didn't aim. She just pointed it at the cluster of gas canisters. She pulled the trigger. Whoosh! The flare didn't hit the men. It hit the leaking valve of the oxygen mix they were tampering with. The explosion wasn't fiery. It was a concussive blast of pressure. The canisters ruptured. The three men were thrown backward into the muddy garden, screaming as the chemical accelerant sprayed over them. Isla didn't wait to see if they were down. She slammed the heavy steel service door shut and threw the deadbolt. "Hey!" a voice bellowed from behind her. Isla spun around. A fourth man had come down the main stairs. He was huge, wearing a balaclava, a submachine gun hanging from a sling across his chest. He saw Isla disheveled, holding a fire extinguisher, looking terrified. He laughed. A dark, wet sound. "Well, look what we have here," he sneered, stepping closer. "The $1 billion nanny." He didn't raise his gun. He wanted to enjoy this. He pulled a knife from his belt, a jagged, nasty thing. "Dante is dead upstairs," the man lied, grinning. "It's just you and me, sweetheart. Where's the brat?" "Dante isn't dead," Isla said, her voice shaking but defiant. "He will be soon. Now tell me where the baby is, and I'll make it quick." He lunged. Isla didn't back away. She swung the fire extinguisher with every ounce of strength she possessed. It was heavy, awkward, and slow. The man saw it coming. He dodged easily, laughing. He backhanded her across the face. Isla flew backward, crashing into the concrete wall. Her vision swam. Iron tasted heavy in her mouth. The man loomed over her, pinning her to the ground with a knee to her chest. He raised the knife. "Say goodnight, Cinderella." Isla squeezed her eyes shut. She reached for the knife in her waistband, but her arm was pinned. "This is it," she thought. "I'm sorry, Sophia." Suddenly a sound tore through the basement. A guttural roar. A sound so primal it didn't sound human. The weight was ripped off Isla's chest. She opened her eyes to see Dante. He had come down the stairs, bleeding from a gunshot wound to his shoulder, his white shirt stained crimson. He hadn't shot the man. He had tackled him. Dante Moretti was brawling like a street fighter. He slammed the assassin's head against the concrete floor once, twice, 3 times. The sickening crack of bone echoed in the narrow hall. The assassin went limp. Dante didn't stop. He punched the unconscious man again, his knuckles splitting his rage uncontained. "Dante!" Isla screamed, scrambling up. "Dante, stop! He's done!" Dante froze, his fist raised in the air, his chest heaving like a bellows. He looked down at the man, then slowly turned his head to Isla. His eyes were terrifying. The pupils were blown with black holes of violence. For a second, Isla wasn't sure if he recognized her. Then he blinked. The monster receded, and the man returned. "Isla," he rasped. He scrambled off the body, crawling toward her on his knees. "Isla, are you hit? Did he touch you?" He grabbed her face, his bloody hands smearing crimson on her cheeks, frantically checking her for bullet holes. "I'm okay," Isla sobbed, collapsing into him. "I'm okay. I had to come out. The vents, they were gassing us." Dante looked at the sealed service door, then back at the panic room. He realized what she had done. She had left the safety of the vault to save their daughter from suffocating. He pulled her into his chest, burying his face in her neck. He was shaking. The king of New York. The man who killed without blinking was shaking uncontrollably. "I thought I lost you," he whispered into her hair. "When I saw the door open, I thought—" "Boss!" Rocco's voice boomed from the stairs. Rocco limped down his shotgun, smoking. Courtyard is clear. NYPD is 3 minutes out. We have 6 bodies in the foyer, the rest scattered. Dante helped Isla stand. He kept one arm wrapped possessively around her waist, supporting her weight. "The baby?" Dante asked. "In the vault," Isla said. "Safe." Dante nodded. He turned to Rocco. "Serena," Rocco spat on the floor. "We caught the driver of the truck. He sang like a bird before he bled out. Serena is at the Teterboro airport. She has a private jet fueled for Rio. She's waiting for the confirmation call that we're dead." Dante's expression shifted. The frantic fear for Isla vanished, replaced by a cold, surgical calm. It was almost more frightening than his rage. "Get the car," Dante said. "Dante, no," Isla pleaded, grabbing his arm. "You're bleeding. The police are coming. Let them handle it." Dante looked at her. He wiped the blood from her cheek with his thumb, his touch tender. "The police will arrest her," Dante said softly. "She will get lawyers. She will get bail. She will come back in 5 years or 10. She will never stop coming for Sophia." He kissed Isla's forehead. "I have to finish this. Go to Sophia. Lock the door. Rocco stays with you." "Dante." He didn't look back. He walked up the stairs, reloading his pistol as he went walking out into the rain to end the war once and for all. Isla didn't sleep. She sat in the ruined foyer of the mansion, huddled under a blanket, watching the flashing lights of the police cars reflecting off the wet driveway. The police had taken statements, but they treated the Moretti estate differently. They didn't ask too many questions. They collected the bodies and left a patrol car at the gate. Rocco sat on the stairs, a bandage wrapped around his head, cleaning his shotgun. "He'll be back," Rocco said without looking up. "The boss doesn't die. He's too stubborn." Isla nodded, but her stomach was in knots. It was dawn when the black SUV rolled through the shattered gates. The car stopped. The door opened. Dante stepped out. He had changed his clothes. He wore a clean black suit, crisp and sharp, though his movement was stiff, favoring his injured shoulder. He walked up the steps. Isla ran to him, colliding with his chest. He caught her with his good arm. "It's done," he whispered into her ear. "Is she?" Isla couldn't finish the sentence. Dante pulled back. He looked into her eyes, and she saw the weight of what he had done. He had carved a piece of his soul away to ensure their safety. "The plane never took off," Dante said simply. "There was a mechanical failure on the runway." Isla knew what that meant. There would be no trial, no prison. Serena was gone. The threat was extinguished. Dante looked over Ila's shoulder at the sunrise bleeding purple and gold over the Manhattan skyline. He looked at the ruin of his home, the bullet holes in the walls, the shattered glass. Then he looked at Ila, and for the first time in the story, he looked truly free. "Go pack a bag," he said softly. "What?" "Why?" Isla asked. "Are we running?" Dante shook his head. He smiled, and it reached his eyes. "No, we're not running. But this house, it smells like smoke and bad memories. And I promised you something." "You promised me." "I promised that if you stayed, I would learn how to trust," Dante said. "I can't do that here. Let's go to the Hamptons' house. Just us, just Sophia. No guards in the hallway. No cameras in the bedroom." He brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. "I want to see what it feels like to just be a father, to just be a man. Will you come with me?" Isla looked at the destruction behind them, and then at the hope in his eyes. "I'll go anywhere with you," she whispered. Dante kissed her. It wasn't a desperate kiss of goodbye or a heated kiss of passion. It was a promise, a seal on a new life. He took her hand, and together they walked into the house to get their daughter leaving the ghosts of the past, to rot in the ruins behind them. 3 months later, the estate was repaired. The glass was replaced, the blood washed away. Isla sat in the garden watching Sophia, now 6 months old, rolling on a blanket in the grass. The baby laughed a pure, joyous sound. "She has your smile," a voice said. Isla looked up. Dante stood there. He looked different, lighter. The darkness in his eyes had receded, replaced by a warmth that was reserved only for her. He sat down beside her on the grass, ignoring the fact that he was wearing a $5,000 suit. "I have something for you," he said. He handed her a velvet box. Isla opened it. It wasn't a ring. It was a key with the Moretti crest. "I don't need a key," Isla said, confused. "I live here." "This isn't a key to the house," Dante said. He took her hand, interlacing his fingers with hers. "It's a key to the vault. I legally adopted you. Well, not adopted. I put your name on everything. If anything happens to me, you and Sophia own half of New York." "Dante," Isla breathed. "I don't want your money." "I know." Dante smiled. It was a real smile. "That's why you deserve it. You found my heart in a dumpster, Isla. You brought me back to life." He leaned in his lips, brushing hers. "I love you." "The King of New York," whispered to the maid from the Bronx. "I love you too," Isla whispered back. And as the sun set over the city, the devil and the angel sat together, watching their daughter play finally peacefully home. What a ride, from a dumpster in the rain to the throne of the New York underworld. Isla didn't just save a baby. She saved a broken man's soul.